Welcome to the Pokemon X and Y preview and outlandish prediction video. I'm the Real Quaid, and I'm going to be talking you through some of the most significant changes to the competitive battling side of the new generation. It's important to note that even now, more and more information about the game is being revealed, so there's a pretty good chance that the facts in this video will change as we get closer to the release. So take everything you see here with a grain of salt. The most significant change in the Pokemon universe is going to be the addition of a brand new 18th type into the mix. Now, we haven't seen a new type since 2000, so it's going to be hard to measure exactly how impactful this new type really is. Especially since I was only 13 back then and I didn't really know a lot about battling competitively. In previous generations, looking at a Pokemon's type would usually give you a pretty good high-level understanding of their competitive usefulness. Until the fairy type settles in terms of its usability, though, it's going to be very tough to figure out just how good or bad a fairy typing is for a Pokemon. Not only that, a lot of old, familiar Pokemon were given the new type as well. The impact of Pokemon like Azumarill and Gardevoir will be very hard to predict now that they have been given a new niche. Only 2 Pokemon in history have actually changed type when moving from one generation to the next, so we're basically in unprecedented territory when trying to analyze old Pokemon that have been given the new type. The Fairy type will act as a check to the ever-present Dragon type. In the current metagame, Dragon is a very powerful type due to the fact that only one type resists it and only 2 types are super effective against it. Fairy will be another addition into both of those columns, meaning it will be harder to simply spam Outrage and expect to wipe through a team. It really looks like it was designed specifically to counteract Dragon. Conversely, it's weak to historically poor attacking types like Poison and Steel, meaning we could see a sort of rock, paper, scissors between the mighty dragons, the new fairies, and the forgotten Poison and Steel attackers. Based on its role in the type chart, Fairy is an incredible defensive type and could possibly shift the entire metagame from a hyper-offensive one that we saw in Generation 5 to a tough and gritty defensive one. The new Fairy typing aside, the next biggest change is the new Mega Evolutions. Though they're not true evolutions in the sense that they're not permanent, the Mega Evolutions basically add a potential 4th stage to the Pokemon chain. These Megas have new abilities than their previous forms, plus an increase in stats to boost their power even higher. You can only have one Mega Evolution per battle, thankfully, so the metagame won't be reduced to just all Mega all the time. Plus, having a Mega Evolution will basically force your Pokemon to act without an item. Until we see just how much each Pokemon's stats get increased, it will be almost impossible to figure out whether they're actually viable in battle or just a fun novelty. Another important change coming is the modification to the resistances of the Steel type. Steel's resistances to Dark and Ghost have been eliminated. Defensive Steel Pokemon are going to find themselves struggling much more against neutral attacks that they are used to resisting, so Pokemon that rely on their typing to wall threats are going to become much less effective. It's not all bad for Steel, though. As one of the 2 types that are super effective to Fairy, Steel actually gains relevance as an attack type for the first time ever. Overall, it actually makes Steel a more balanced type instead of being a powerhouse on defense and a laughingstock on offense. Now, let's talk about winners and losers in the new generation. This is going to be about Pokemon that currently exist, but due to changes in the generation switch, are about to see their roles and their usage change. Now, let's start with the losers. Skarmory, Forretress, Bronzong, and Jirachi all take a huge hit as defensive Steel types. Bronzong and Jirachi gain 2 new weaknesses thanks to the new chart, and Skarmory and Forretress are going to have a much tougher time dealing with neutral Dark and Ghost attacks from the special side. These Pokemon were great tanks primarily as a result of their typing, so their job just got a lot harder. Metagross takes a bit of a hit alongside Bronzong and Jirachi as well, but due to its offensive nature, it will still see usage. Meteor Mash is about to become a very attractive attack to punish Fairy types, and Metagross's huge attack stat and access to agility and Bullet Punch will still keep it relevant in the metagame. The rest of the Steel types will also be affected by the chart changes slightly, but their more balanced or offensive nature will offset the pain that they feel from losing those resistances. Dragons are another big loser on the list. Spamming Outrage suddenly becomes a huge liability since there are Pokemon that are now immune to it. The existence of Fairy is going to severely cripple the usage of physically offensive dragons, and Hydreigon gets an additional slap in the face as it will now be 4 times weak to Fairy attacks. The risk of using dragons in the past was a result of everyone knowing the small number of counters they had. In the new generation, the real risk is going to be the significantly increased number of ways to deal with them. If you were a fan of dragons at all, you probably hate yourself right now. Now, let's talk about the good stuff. At the top of my winners list is Venusaur. I've always been a fan of Venusaur in general, but I always liked using it more as a bulky tank than as a chlorophyll sweeper. Well, now my tanking Venusaur days are about to return thanks to the creation of Mega Venusaur. Thick Fat eliminates half of its weaknesses, plus it gets a boost in its already acceptable defensive stats once it gets into its Mega form. Venusaur already learned some awesome support moves like Leech Seed, Sleep Powder, Knock Off, Toxic, and Synthesis, not to mention a Stab Giga Drain and a handy immunity to Toxic. So I would not be surprised to see tanking Venusaur near the forefront of the metagame. A new addition that was just announced is that grass types are now immune to powder moves like Spore, Stun Spore, and Sleep Powder. Though this may hurt Venusaur's usability against opposing grass types, it also means he can serve as a sponge to all of those moves at once. Another winner and a close second place to Venusaur is Gengar. Apart from the Steel type, Poison is the other type that is super effective to Fairy. If you still want to abuse strong dragon attacks on your team, a good Poison or Steel attacker is going to be necessary to open the window, and there is none greater than Gengar. Massive special attack, great speed, and an incredible move pool mean that Gengar is going to be a huge threat to the metagame. It's one of only 2 Pokemon to be in Smogon's overused tier for all 5 generations so far, and there's no question that it will end up there again. One last point that's interesting to bring up is some speculation on how the new type chart will end up settling over time. In Generation 5, it was pretty clear that the fighting type was king. With how the new chart is set up, though, it's hard to predict what the best type will be, or if there even will be a best type in the game. Even though only one type was introduced, and only one type was slightly modified, every type on the list is going to be impacted in some meaningful way. Let's see if I can walk you through some of my thought process when reflecting on some of the changes. Well, the Fairy type is coming in, and it's obviously going to be very common to stop dragons, so it will probably be everywhere. This means Ice-type attacks are going to be less necessary, so Grass, Ground, and Flying Pokemon are going to enjoy that. Grass types did get a little less effective against other grass types, though, because of the new powder rules. Fairy is super effective against fighting, too, and now that Steel doesn't resist Dark, maybe Dark will be an important type. But wait, Dark is also weak to the new Fairy, so all of the Fairies that keep the fighting attacks at bay are going to be hurting Dark types too anyway. Well, with fighting gone, what about tough rock types that can set up stealth rocks everywhere? Oh, wait, Steel type is super effective against Fairy, so people are going to be carrying more Steel type attacks to stop that, and it'll spill over into being super effective to the rocks as well. Well, what about Poison? It both resists and is super effective to Fairy, so it gains a pretty clear advantage in all of this. Those are actually some of the thoughts that were going through my head as I pondered the new types and their interactions with one another. Flying and ground types gain some help now that ice attacks are less necessary, and ghost types are going to love free neutral attacks that they get against Steel now. After some thought, though, the Poison type is clearly the big winner in the new type wars. But the problem with Poison has always been a lack of good Pokemon of that type. Whether Mega Forms or new Pokemon will come in and fix that or not still remains to be seen. Or maybe a Poison legendary Pokemon for once. But the real point is that there's absolutely no way of predicting exactly what will happen when the game drops. Hopefully this video has given you guys some insight into what to expect when Generation 6 comes out. This has been The Real Quaid, and thank you guys for watching.
If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions for any future videos, leave them in the comments below. If you are interested in participating in our online Pokemon League, click the link in the description for more information.